Now it's time to actually create our instances. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type tab, instance, and our overall object level. I'm going to put this up here under our ground, move these around a little bit, because these will be the things that actually get rendered. Call this instances, and I'm going to make that bright yellow again, because that's just what I use for things that we actually are going to see. I'm going to click off on particle result. Okay, so now we're going to go inside the instances node. You can see by default there's just an add node in there that just adds one point in the middle of the scene just to have a default instance. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an object merge. We can bring anything in here we want, and I'm going to go to our particle result, and you can see we have right up at the top here this underscore out, and I'm going to bring that in. Okay, so now we've brought in our points into the instances node, and just for good measure, I'm just going to make a null on the end of that and then do underscore out, because we could do all sorts of work in here to tweak these points as well, and I always just want to know what's at the end of my chain. Okay, so now we are going to go to the parameters window here for the instances, and we're going to go over to the instance tab. And first off, we're going to go to point instancing and say fast point instancing. And all of a sudden, now we have geometry instead of just points there. And this is because on these points, let's go to geometry spreadsheet, because we have this instance attribute that points to actual geometry that the scene can find, it will then actually start instancing those to our points. So right off the bat, this is really cool, right? So now I can already see our objects instance of that, and it's super fast. This is, because it's only bringing one copy of each of those pieces of geometry into memory and then doing sort of like smart memory stuff to be able to not have to have multiple copies of the mesh. So this is a really, really efficient way to have lots of geometry on screen. All right, cool. So a bit of setup to get all this working right, but then you can see like the results are pretty awesome and that we can really deal with a lot of geometry in some cool ways using instancing. Okay, so the other things we want to do here is just we want to go under point motion blur, and I want to change this to use point velocity attribute, because we've done all this work in our particle result geometry object to kind of refine and tweak our velocity vectors, and then we're just going to have those apply to this geometry's motion blur. We don't need it to recalculate anything. We've already kind of custom did that. Okay, so that's really awesome. So I'm going to go to the RenderCam view. I'm going to turn the ground back on here, and let's go to flat wire shaded mode. And there we go. It actually is kind of applying what it can from the shader that's assigned to those points. And this is cool. We can see everything's moving around, it's rotating properly like we created our vectors to do. Everything's p-scaling down, so by the time everything gets to the bottom, everything kind of fades out, and all that sort of weird wobbling that we were concerned about, none of that's happening because we fixed the orientation, and then everything gets smaller. So we have our geometric object volcano working with instances in a really cool way. And next up, we're just going to move just to making sure all the shaders are applied to everything and kick off a render frame.